Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Svante Cornell. I'm the director of the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute. This is an event that is mainly an online event. It will be preserved for posterity, but we also have a select group of people who are invited to witness our proceedings live as they happen. Welcome. This is a great moment for us, which we used to have every semester. The pandemic, unfortunately, forced us to pause that, but now we're back in full force. This is the presentation of the Rumsfeld Fellows of the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute, and that's why this event is organized in cooperation with the Rumsfeld Foundation, which is strongly represented here today. And we are always eager to hear from the updates on what happens in the region from the young leaders of this region that are here for our fellowship. Obviously, this is a collective effort from the whole group through various ways that we would it's like sausage making. You don't want to know how the sausage maker comes out. You don't want to know how they decide who is going to speak and not, whether it involves violence or threats or any other type of coercive measures. But I see that there are some who are selected here to make the initial presentation of the vision of the fellows for the new era for the CAMCA region. But of course, everybody who is part of the fellowship, please put your hands up so that people know who you are. Some are in the back, most of them are hiding in the corner here. But obviously, as our discussion proceeds, we want this to be a discussion. The other members of the group will also be speaking up. I would just stop here, and I would like you to please go ahead, tell us what is the new era of CAMCA, and then after that we will have a very good discussion, I hope. Carry on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Timur Nazarbekov. Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here at American Foreign Policy Council, and I'm delighted to be here as a Rumsfeld Fellow and speaker. For the past 6 weeks, we had the opportunity to meet with the most brilliant people, exceptional leaders, and outstanding institutions such as think tanks, NGOs, public and private organizations. Our presentation synthesized the American outlook for geostrategy, our local perception of the region, and our aspiration for the CAMCA region. We call the presentation CAMCA as a new era, and our understanding of the new era is driven by two forces: population dynamics and strategic momentum in the region, geopolitics involving actors such as Russia and China. Indeed, if we want to get a maximum payoff for momentum for our countries, we certainly must define the challenges in the new era and strategies to tackle these challenges. Another crucial aspect is who will be the CAMCA's greatest strategic partner in the new era. The strategic partner could assist us with economic and political development and inspire us with the great virtues and values. So this is what we'd like to share with you today, and you see the next slide. So it's kind of agenda, and we'd like to talk about population dynamics. We would like to talk about challenges we have at CAMCA region. What does it mean, strategic momentum, and what are the opportunities and strategy to tackle these challenges? So, and I'll pass to my colleague.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Halal Masumi from Afghanistan. And I would very much like to wish to secure and represent an Afghanistan which was free and free of terrorist groups. But unfortunately, due to the Taliban's takeover, I can only represent my people of Afghanistan here. So, as we all know, the CAMCA region has not been on the agenda of the US for the past decade as much as needs to be. So we're trying to focus on the CAMCA region. I'd like to explain what CAMCA stands on, because most of the people might think about what is CAMCA. CAMCA is Central Asia, Mongolia, Caucasus, and Afghanistan. So, and I'm very thankful for the foundation, Rumsfeld Foundation, UPC, and everyone here for giving us the opportunity to come together and share our perspectives on the region. One of the most important things about the region is its changing dynamics and how it should be important for the US. Per United Nations prediction, Central Asia countries will reach 100 million people, which it shows that the growth is by 36.9%. And it's higher than the average in the world. And the average in the world is 26.2%. So by 2050, the population of the CAMCA region itself will go to 200 million people. And it's an important measure. And most of these people would be youth, and they would be the Generation Z. And what we have to consider about Generation Z is they are, these people are, they're less in contact with the status quo and less, they have less trust on the Soviet Union era. And they have their phones, they have the technology, they have the social media platforms to connect with the world. So it's very important, and they want to develop their countries and be one of the competitive regions in the world. So I personally think that it's an economic opportunity. They will create a lot of economic opportunities, and one of the other advantages of these people who are living in the region is they are monolinguistic. They share one language, which will be easier for them to communicate with each other, and they will better communicate their benefits in the region and their and how can they have more connection to the out world, specifically USA. And with that being said, I'd like to take the stage to Carol to talk about more opportunities, which are
yes. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm Carol from Mongolia. I'm happy to present you as well. So we wish this audience to also recognize another key driver for potential transformation in the region, and this is the vast human capital of the region and the very willingness of us people, our people, to engage more in regional development and economic reforms. We understand that to capture an important share of the global trade, our region must cooperate on opening more trade routes. We expect our governments to actively pursue alternative trade routes, transport routes, and supply chains other than what was proposed by China. We're seeing in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, the countries are expanding its infrastructure to become transport and logistics hub for Central Asia. Meanwhile, in Mongolia has the potential to become transit route for civil aviation, for example. And aside from trade and transport development, our private sectors have the most capacity to drive regional collaborations and geopolitical ties. This region, what's unique to our private sector is that they are highly resilient in sustaining its own growth. And only if we could inject enough capital, they are bound to make a huge implosion of economic activities and to diversify the regional economies. We're seeing a lot of small and medium enterprises emerging in certain parts of the region, diversifying the economic prospects. And these are all driven by what she said as young people and women entrepreneurs. We also see regional single route tourism as another driver of regional development. Development of historical and cultural tourism is already being strategized in some parts of our region. Moving on to the next point, according to ADB's CARET digital strategy 2030, digitizations of healthcare, education, agriculture, tourism, trade, and finance can boost our regional cooperation. And we also know from our own experience that digitization of government services and public services can really help us overcome some of our biggest challenges, namely corruption and bureaucracies. And in cases of Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, the average cost of generating electricity is the lowest in the region. And in these countries, there are huge availability of human resources. And this creates opportunities to develop alternative manufacturing hub, for example, and new industries, and more importantly, tech-driven service economies. It's known that that CAMCA region has a lot of mineral resources. We talk about this quite often. It ranges from high deposits of molybdenum, copper, manganese, chromium to lithium. But beyond natural resources, the region offers unique premium quality agricultural products, such as caviar, cashmere, and saffron. And supporting these agricultural products through trade and sustainability, standardization, and export, and help them to export these goods to the US and European market will essentially help us eradicate our heavy dependencies on commodities and mining, for example. And to sum up, the region has vast potential to become an economically interdependent region, sharing a very advanced trade system and enabling huge socioeconomic transformation, essentially. And however, facilitating open trade and access to finance for the private sectors within the region should be the key focus from US and international partners. So that's it.
Thank you, everyone. Fires, for those who may not know me, but I'm also part of the fellowship. Let me know if you can't hear me, because I tend to have very low voice. But it's a privilege to be part of this group. I think over the last six weeks, I got to know, even though we are from the same region, but certainly there is a lot of commonality, but also differences. So it's been incredible to share houses with people from Azerbaijan, and also go to meetings and have lunches. So for me, it's been an experience, but also it has been a massive learning for me. Knowing perspective of different individuals from the region about how the future will look like for our generation. And a lot of us, that we represent that driving force for the region. The name CAMCA, it's pretty much, we come to call it Samsa, which is a pastry in the region. We quite like it, but I think, as you heard from my colleagues, there's a lot of potential from a human capital. There's a massive population of young people. There's also a lot of resources and potential to create enormous opportunity for economic development, for connectivity with the rest of the world, and do that in a separate world, in a separate era, which is not centered around Russia and Russia's influence in the region and Russia's saying in the region. there's a lot of challenges to reach that. So the dream that we, over the last 6 weeks, what we've come to talk about, what does it mean in the era where there's a sad sort of conflict that is ruining the lives of Ukrainian. We don't know what that represents in the future, in the next 5 years, 10 years for Kazakhstan, for Uzbekistan, for Tajikistan, where the politics of Russia, where the driving elite of the force, the elite of Russia, having their own agenda. What does it mean for us? Does that mean that in the next 5 years we see another conflict between Russia and Kazakhstan, or does it mean that we have a tight control over the policy, economic policy, microeconomic policy, and relationship with outside of the circle of the Russian influence? But to dream about the region in a sense that we want to see an interconnected region where there's no restrictions in the border and there is trade, significant trade with a bilateral benefit between these countries. We face some challenges. We know that sort of from the economic risk due to sanctions to Russia, it's not a secret that the CAMCA region heavily dependent on Russian economy. And that comes from import and export between these countries. There's a massive trade. In some shape or form, it is imposed to have that relationship. But at the same time, it's the easiest route that has been sort of established for over 30 years, right? And that also heavily driven by the influence of Russia wanting to keep enforced friendship with these countries. We know that the sanctions that are posed against Russia, they impact not only Russia, they impact the rest of the region. And this is the dilemma that you face, where I think European countries and America wants to collaborate with Central Asia, with Mongolia, with Caucasus. But imposing sanctions on Russia also directly impacts the region, given that there's a lot of export from these countries, from dried fruit, from other sort of resources that go into Russia, that significantly reduced. We've kind of represented some statistics here coming from World Bank. You can see that there's a lot of inter-trade between mainly Russia. And when it comes to general population, we spoke in an event yesterday that these sanctions, I think we had a meeting, the sanctions usually imposed to Russia to punish Russia directly also impact the population. It's unavoidable. And the same goes to Central Asian countries, because as you can see, the statistics about remittance from Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan tend to be those countries that heavily depend on the remittance to coming to these countries to help the families. Now, what does it mean in the face of this conflict with Ukraine? What does that represent when it comes to the general population, to their education, to their development? I think we also shouldn't forget that the sanctions heavily imposed to Russia impacted in Kazakhstan, for instance, Sberbank had to be sold. That also impacts employment in the region, but also reduced investment. Some of you might have seen the recent meeting with head of state in Russia, where there was some strong statements coming out from President of Tajikistan. I'm not sure if it was a game, was it planned in advance, but you can see that the geopolitics is slowly changing. You can see that in a way, I'm not going to only talk about from Tajikistan, where I'm from. We've been kind of kept in a cage where this is how much you're allocated, you can do, but not to be exposed to the full potential that the countries with their resources, with their human capital, with a changing digital world where you have a very good underlying population that could be a big resource for technological advancement and take part in the global economy. But also, I think, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yes, so if I may, so I could tell from my central bank, as a central banker, I used to work at the central bank of Kazakhstan. So given the fact that we have quite a close relationship between Russia and Palestine, so the majority of imports and exports within, let's say, 7 or 8 months, been in ruble, in Russian ruble. Russia is not convertible currency anymore. So it's interesting that they flooding all these rubles to Palestine, and to hedge this currency, the central bank should convert in US dollars. But if they convert to US dollars, but how can Russian banks provide dollars? So that's one of the challenges, I think, that within Eurasian Economic Union, or even a relationship between on a monetary policy side. So, and another, I think that given the fact that we've exposed to Russia, for example, they trying to reduce their share in Eurasian Development Bank, which means they play a less significant role in development and some kind of infrastructure project, or even making some loans to small and medium-term enterprises.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And I think we shouldn't forget about security. I think one part of the challenges for the prosperity of the region is the influence of sanctions on Russia and dependency on the trade with Russia and remittance from Russia. There's also a security issue. We know that the US withdrew from Afghanistan, and Afghanistan now under a group of very educated and very smart people who are running the country. Sorry, not you. But this also imposes a direct security to the region. And I think we shouldn't exclude that the fact that there is some dream about the future of this region, but peacekeeping and security is one of the biggest part for this ideas to prosper. And we know that Tajikistan, which borders with Afghanistan, this is a question that I raised yesterday, but I feel like I didn't get a good answer. So I have to maybe a little bit talk about it, because Tajikistan has a massive border with Afghanistan. And Tajikistan has also, I think, kept a good tight in that border. Let's not talk about the sort of hidden trades of other things, but in terms of security, right? There's also different benefits and I would say interests in the border to be tightly kept without conflict. But what does it mean when Russia also involved in that border control? What does it mean when any of the sort of CAMCA regions will cut ties in a sense with Russia, agreeing with some other sort of agreements with European Union or with other countries that are not friendly with Russia? What does that mean, in terms of security? Because we know that in the game of geopolitics, any tools are useful tools to keep tight control and create instability, right? We shouldn't really forget about this element, and it's something that needs to be addressed not only by Tajikistan, but also it needs to be incorporating other players, such as the big brother China, who's next door. So China's role, I think, in being part of this security, not only for the region, but also in potentially having an interest in developing some sort of relationship. What does that mean for region? What does that mean for China? I think it needs to be defined in a framework that doesn't keep us from one web of nets, which would be Russia, to another one that is tightly controlled and heavily influenced. But also, I think Russia and Ukraine will put a big pressure on the CAMCA region countries in terms of, I guess, what would a situation, a scenario mean where the region or the countries will not necessarily agree, because at the moment we know that there's a disbalance between the states who is supporting this war and who is against this war, and it's very sort of delicate eggshell. The red carpet is laid there that people walk very sensibly and expressing their support or their objection to the war. But also, We know that the US sees a very kind of limited priority in the region. That they withdrew from Afghanistan. I think they're not interested to be in the region to an extent where they used to be. It cost the US a lot of money, but it also, I guess, in the face of the conflict with Ukraine, the focus has shifted elsewhere. So if we may go to the next slide. So whenever you get tired of me, just raise a hand and ask a question. So the other issues that we need to address in the region, it's quite strange that we are a very small country, which we could have a huge benefit, economical benefits from trading with, collaborating between each other. But there's trade barriers, lack of unified trading policies with the CAMCA regions. We don't have any agreements that makes it easier through the customs. And as you know, recent conflicts between Kyrgyzstan, friendly neighbor, and Tajikistan imposed a lot of hardship on the transit routes. And some of these smaller conflicts that happened in the past and happening now, what are the driving forces? There's lots of varying views when you talk to various people. But we know that these challenges will definitely create, stop us from progressing. Internal barriers and bureaucratic customs procedures, I know from my own experience that it's very difficult when you talk about the whole region. Every country has its own policies, bureaucracies, and procedures in how the customs and trading works. But unless there is a unified agreement, unless there's driving forces and that make changes, make revolutionary changes in these areas, that is not driven by human, but driven by more technology, driven by automation, driven by agreements and bilateral benefits between these countries, then these are also huge hurdles that will definitely be a stumbling block for a better future. And small inter-regional trade volumes with the CAMCA region. We know that our main sort of customer is Russia. We have a businessman among us whose business is mainly dependent on Russian trade, and including labor force, including any production of goods or services that are produced, our main customer is Russia. But between these regions, there tend to be maybe some of you might have a better insight into what could be solutions or reasons why the region doesn't trade between us. But you can see in the statistics that I hope that you can see the numbers, but it's very small amount of numbers that are represented when you look at the intertrade between the CAMCA region. It's insignificant enough that you can ignore it, because most of the trade is potentially just directed to, or hope for any trade is between Russia and small amount to European countries, depending on what country you look at. Right? Some countries that are now heavily involved with the European economy, but most of the other smaller countries that with poor economy is primarily focused, market focus is Russia. Lack of cooperation and communication in the region. We don't have systematic ways of understanding economic policies, custom unions. There's no platform where you can get enough information so that in some ways you can do reforms or automate. A lack of academic studies and research in the past, what policies could work and what policies potentially are efficient, and what models could work in this region. Because of its nature, because of its historical and traditions and the way that the region works, I think it's very difficult to take one model of economic policy in any areas of the economy and macroeconomics to apply it directly. And that's due to the fact that the technological advancements or governance is not as advanced when you compare it to European countries or even US. The absence of regional media coverage, we don't have any sort of central hub or central, I would say, content production think tank, or even bodies that would promote the region. There's no statistic or reliable statistics when it comes to investment from foreign investment, not primarily from Russia, but from European countries and US. You cannot get reliable statistics, right? So usually these statistics are produced primarily internally for making the performance of the countries better. But when it comes to risk assessments from various organizations, you can see a very, very poor rating on these countries, right? So there's a huge risk when it comes to thinking about investment. Underdeveloped infrastructure, as we know, we're slowly getting to creating roads connecting different cities, depending what country you look at, but huge economic potential due to perspective of demographic dynamics by 2050. If these infrastructures or these issues are addressed, I think there's the region could have a very efficient route to enter the European market. And I think that's something that is utmost priority to focus on infrastructure. Substantial opportunities to invest in the minerals and resources and rare earth materials. We know that the region has a huge opportunity. We know that China already has interest in the region and in the resources, given that Chinese economy is now heavily focused on unearthing these minerals and resources. We know that in Tajikistan there's active investment from China. We know that China also is trying to benefit from the region, but at the same time, infrastructure for logistic hubs and how to deliver these resources to the European market, where we have more fair trade, I would say, and a market that we have a huge potential. The infrastructure restricts us from that because a lot of these countries are landlocked, and how without collaboration and cooperation and fair policy between the borders and how the labor trade goods can move, it can be a massive hurdle for any progress in the future. So I'm gonna stop there, and I think sorry, the next slide.
So I think that we've talked about challenges, right? But in terms of strategic momentum in geopolitics, I think that we have quite interesting environmental situation. So, for example, within 30 years, Russia and China has invested around $70 billion in Central Asia, including other countries, I mean, in the region. So, but the problem for CAMCA region is, what does it mean, strategic momentum? In our understanding, this is a kind of shift from the object of geopolitics more to the subject. But the question is, of course, would be the last, let's say, within years or even decades. But given the fact that we have a problem with the economy, in Russia, we have seen quite problems in China. So the main question would be as a strategic partner who could help us to build infrastructure and who could replace at least partially Russia and China in terms of investment opportunities. So, and I think that momentum could be good if we be more interlinked and more cooperative within CAMCA region, and potentially which would help us to get some kind of maximum payoff from this momentum.
My colleague talked about how important is the security in the region. I'd like to go back and go to the starting point of the security issues in the region, specifically in Central Asia and Afghanistan. So we have a term in Afghanistan. We call Afghanistan Central Asia. And we say that if there is an instability in Afghanistan, there will be instability in the region. But now I say that if there is an instability in the region, there will be instability in the world. So we have to take the security issues seriously. For example, the Russian attack started on Ukraine after the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. It gave Russia the power and the courage that, yes, if the US can do this, I can attack any country. So, and since the Taliban's takeover, we have been noticing a lot of malicious activities inside Afghanistan and around Afghanistan, which are Central Asian countries, specifically in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, which is going to affect the region. And one of the main reasons is the Taliban being in Afghanistan. They have created a safe haven for the other malicious groups, which can have their training sessions, they can have their place, they can have their people. They've created a very safe haven. The groups like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, like the Islamic Jihad Union, Islamic State Khorasan, which is very active right now, Jihad al-Nusra, were operating in northern provinces, mainly in Azerbaijan and Faryab. And they're very close to the border of Turkmenistan and also to Uzbekistan. Not long time ago, like in April, there were rockets thrown from Kairatong to Termez, which is a city in Uzbekistan. And we saw on April there were a lot of shootings and some smaller fights going on in Tajikistan. It might be small in the border of Tajikistan and Afghanistan. It might be small right now, but it can grow bigger and bigger after some time. We should always know that we cannot trust Taliban in terms of security, although that they mention that they always say that we're not a threat to the Central Asia, we're not a threat to the region in terms of security, but they we cannot trust them. They would support the malicious activities in the region knowingly and willingly. Let me talk about one of the most important groups, terrorist groups, which are functioning in Afghanistan, from Afghanistan right now. And they're very much different from the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, which was there before. That Islamic movement of Uzbekistan was only targeting to change the system of Uzbekistan. But the Islamic State Khorasan, or some people call it Islamic State Khorasan province, they have the mentality of Khalafat. They want to bring, they think that they are a group that can make the region and make the world an Islamic state, Islamic United States. And surprisingly, they are not less in number. And they are very diverse. The members of those, this Islamic State Khorasan, I'm going to read the diversity of the people who are the members. There are Arabs, there are Afghans, there are Chechens, there are Kyrgyz, there are Kazakhs, there are Pashtuns, Syrians, Tajiks, Turks, Uyghurs, and other Eurasian ethnic groups. What does this mean? This means that these people who influence and start making it bigger can create a better situation. In the map, you can see that for the past 10 years, at least 25 attacks have been done in the region. You see, and then the latest was in Tajikistan and some parts of Tajikistan. These are the malicious activities that are going on in the region. So, how can US play a good role in here? The US can work with Central Asian states to build a resilience to short and long-term threats. Some people might think that okay, these countries are being protected by CSTO, which is the Collective Security Organization, but CSTO, from the neighbors of Afghanistan, only Tajikistan is a member of CSTO, and my colleague just mentioned that how crudely they're functioning. So US is needed to strengthen the independence of Malian actors and to develop political, economical, and security partnership with the United States.
So the general idea. So we talked about population dynamics. We talked about strategic momentum. We talked about strategic challenges and opportunities. So within our Rumsfeld fellows, we propose strategic priorities which we could solve these challenges. So we have some kind of regional economic cooperation, media and communication. We have priority on education and P2P exchange, and think tank and research. So in terms of regional economic cooperation, I think that it's vital at this current stage for the CAMCA region to create within government organization development bank, especially precisely orientated only for the CAMCA region. So by launching this development bank, we believe that it could actually help to improve economic links, increase the investment opportunities, but also some kind of trade values among CAMCA region. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So moving on to the next point. Okay. So one of the things that we as CAMCA network can do and contribute the most is activation of communications, sort of contra flow of information coming out of the region to the Western world, and also inter-regional media and communications activities supporting the regional operation, etc. So we covered a lot of areas in which the media and communications activities can focus on. These are always. I mean, with information, more information is, the more the information is, the more activities there are. So information has a lot of power in spurring activities, in regional activities.
Yeah. So I just want to add to the communication. I think we went to in one of our discussions with the fellowship. It's very difficult to find a very sort of academic or good publication about the region in English. I think when it comes to sort of any thought leadership or I guess coverage about any topics about the region from a local perspective, that's something that is lacking, and something that I think we decided that would be a good opportunity for us to start maybe contributing to the resources about the region, and communication through this publication will be something that in the future, not necessarily about a specific sort of topic, but generally coverage of the economic opportunities, any particular sort of opportunities around the collaboration between the region, or partnership between the region, be it in the private sector or public sector, would be a good idea to increase the presence in online and particularly in English.
And in terms of the education and P2P exchange, we've seen in the past years that the exchange programs among the region and the USA has gone has decreased hugely. For example, I can give an example of my country, Afghanistan, that there were 60 Fulbright scholarships for the youth coming from Afghanistan to the USA. But last year and this year, it was decreased. It was taken off it was kind of canceled. And then when they brought it back, they decreased the number. They made it for 20. We all know that for having a great connection, you need to have people-to-people connection first. So it's very important, first in the region, to have exchange programs in political, economical, cultural, and in sports in any way that we can. And from the region to the US, so that US citizens and US policymakers can understand better the region and Central Asia and the Caucasus and Afghanistan, Mongolia can get closer to the US in terms of people-to-people connection and understanding our regions.
So on this think tank and research, I had limited knowledge about that. I promise you, this is the last slide, by the way. I know that so you guys have been very patient with us, and there'll be time for questions. But we went and we met think tanks in the US. I heard the word think tanks. I knew what roughly it meant, but what I didn't know what it represents and what they do. And this was a good idea that actually we could have these sort of instruments in the region, and these instruments will be a vital source of information for a lot of ideas that could come to fruition in the next 5-10 years. But unfortunately, there's no materials or resources online for that. So one of the key pillars of for a brighter future of CAMCA region would be creating a platform for this region to collaborate between the US think tanks, between the European think tanks, to produce publications, produce materials that would cover various topics, including economic and political, as well as the private sector. And also, it's very vital that I think what I liked about the fellowship, that connection between various individuals from different regions will allow us to maybe in the future take on projects to collaborate and produce content and initiatives about a particular topic in the region, and also maybe collaborate with European and US maybe investors to try to help us to produce content online. I think that's something that could it's an effort to initially start it, but long term it could be one of the biggest factors when it comes to having resources about the region. And the last one is, I promise you again, this is going to be very clear, but it's very important that collaborative effort from all players in the country. And it's very difficult when you have a small group of people to get everyone to work together. And I can tell you that from my experience. But without this and without some incentive that will give different countries, different players, both in the private sector and public sector, to come together, it will be a very, very challenging effort to dream about a better future without heavy dependency on Russia, a better future with more close ties with European Union and America. Collaborative effort at all levels to create an environment for partnership with all parties will be beneficial, and that only happens if all parties have some sort of interest in that. Develop a self-sustainable future by joining forces, resources, equal rights, and fair trade for all participants. We know that there could be an incredible model of production and resource exploration if the countries will if the countries and private sector will come to some sort of bilateral interest to play together. Partnerships in standardizing business processes, custom rules, and border regulations in the region. I can tell you that even though we live in a small area of the globe, but it's sometimes very challenging to go from one country to another or export and import goods. And I think that's an area also where the government, business, private sector, and consumers can collaborate. And then also lastly, and not least, but it's very important that we utilize a format of communication that will be transparent, that will expose the risks, but at the same time also shows the opportunities and what can be done in the region. With that in mind, yeah. Sorry.
So I think that by solving the challenges and implementing strategies, at least we think that it will be as a first step, a kind of grand preparation for the CAMCA region, for our societies, people, for the benefit of civil society, economic prosperity, and hopefully for happiness. Thank you for attention.
Thank you. You've been a very patient. So I know that we spoke about a lot of stuff.
Okay, sorry, please. Thank you for this very serious presentation, which covered a lot of ground. We're glad that we have this on the record. We hope that you write it down in different ways and we can disseminate it. I have some questions of my own, but I will wait for them until there are no more questions. We have about half an hour for a discussion. The floor is open. Yes, sir, at the back.
We're a democracy, which is where we often hear in terms of the current administration in Washington to address the internal political situation in various countries. I think I have some inkling of democracy in Afghanistan, but the other countries are depend on the same.
Who would like to give a short answer to that question? I could write a book or two about it.
But I will give my perspective. It's actually a very good point, and I have to admit, I think we missed the word democracy, but we actually meant it through this presentation. Well, what I would say, I think democracy, in a way, the challenges and the opportunities that are there. A lot of time, democracy also very tightly linked with influence of livelihood of people, right? And also it also tied with the education of the young generation. It's also tied with the globalization of the economies. And I think that the democracy that we want to have in the region, it can be enforced, and it does take a substantial amount of time, investment in education, but also globalization of workforce of this region, not to be necessarily dependent on Russia and the way that Russian system works, but also be exposed to a global economy that is more democratic. I think that's what my answer is.
So in Mongolia's case, Mongolia is on a fast route to strengthen its democracy due to the geopolitical pressures from Russia. I mean, we are now our government and parliamentarians are very much focused on strengthening the parliamentary democracy inside the country. I know it has gone through some patchy periods in recent times, but we are very much dedicated and committed to building a much stronger and resilient and also exemplary democracy within the region, so that the rest of the society can maybe look.
So if I may, I think that the population dynamics, which shows that within 3 decades it will reach 200 million people, the median age 27. So definitely we want that people live in democracy. So the young and rights.
The question is how to do it. Yes, sir. Oh, did you want to add something? Please.
Well, I can only answer in terms of Afghanistan that before the Taliban's takeover, specifically the bigger cities of Afghanistan, people were very democratic, and we had freedom of media, freedom of expression, we had all kinds of freedom. But we had all of those with our allies backing us up. But right now it's very, very tragic and very, very saddening to see that all these years we work on bringing democracy in Afghanistan, but it's shattered in only one day. In order to bring democracy in Afghanistan, there's one solution for it, eradicating Taliban. The only problem is Taliban, no one else. So if we get enough support from the international community to get rid of Taliban, instead of accepting them, legitimizing them as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, then we will get democracy.
Yes, sir, also at the back. That's you.
Thank you. My name is Bayou, and I'm from Afghanistan and researcher. Work and travel. So the presentation from the lots of different organizations, Switzerland asking US for cooperation, for technology, for all other aspects of this research, but it's Central Asia, South Asia, spiritual region. So my question is just one slide away from part of this priority, strategic priority. It looks like a kind of recommendation. So if we put them in the perspective of recommendations, priorities, what the objects of those US, Central Asia, China, Afghanistan, who?
Are you asking the target of the recommendation or the author of the recommendation?
Not the recommendation.
Audience?
We go back one slide.
The second last.
One
One more? Yes, yes. So let's go to cultural education. For example, if you exchange as the date of exchange means cultural exchange. You bring people from the United States to Central Asian countries and countries to the United States to exchange cultures. Specific question I'd like to ask: does the Central Asian countries, but even South Asian countries, Afghanistan, have the capacity to absorb those cultural exchanges? So, what does, in a context of Central Asia cultural exchange, mean? What does media freedom mean? For example, Turkmenistan, very rigid country, but very rigid regime. I was part of a research working in a German think tank with all 5 Central Asian countries. I traveled to all 5 Central Asian countries to just get, for example, a 10-piece of recommendation. What Afghanistan can do for Central Asia and what Central Asia can do for Afghanistan. This was just very simple question. We have to go through different layers of officials and formalities to get those recommendations. And it has to be tested, it has to be filtered through different institutions. Just some piece of recommendation to be published, to have a consensus from the region. So my question is, how all these recommendations or priorities that you ask from the US in a hypothetical scenario, suppose that the US say yes, let's do it.
I think we got your point, sir.
So how do you see the region available for really to absorb this?
I can answer maybe a short answer, sorry, and interrupt me if I speak too long. But I think some of these ideas, these are the dreams. I have to be honest, this is a dream that everyone that we came here, we spoke about different topics, this is what we want to see. And this is what we wished. And I think, to your point, it's every person's individual, how much contribution to make to make those changes. Every person, so it takes to me. Yes, of course, yeah, and I think you're right. There's a lot of thing that we put into this presentation, but it's a dream. It's a dream that everyone that we want to we want to achieve
Let's
this.
call it a vision rather than a dream.
Vision, yeah,
It's a vision.
yeah.
I think as for education, I think that in Kazakhstan, for example, we have a program which is called Bolsha. So roughly 10,000 students studied within Western and American universities. I think that it was one of the best solution initiative by the government of Kazakhstan. And if United States tries to recreate the kind of flex program, recreate Fulbright, I think that's brilliant and wonderful idea to understand. I mean, not only Central Asia, but Central Asians understand US. To the previous question about democracy, civil society, etc.
Any others? Perhaps from our group? Yes, but I'm waiting for more answers, not more questions at this point. Seems to me that there are a lot of things that you call this a dream. A lot of these things are happening already, just not on a big scale.
I have to
You shouldn't
excuse-
shortchange yourself.
Exactly, I have to excuse the language that I use, but definitely a vision. But this is when I say the desire, this is what we want to see, this is what we want to achieve, this is what we want to do. And some of these, yes, you're right, some of these initiatives already in Tajikistan, like you mentioned, we have more flexibility in terms of student exchanges. Probably not as much as with Georgia, like compared to Georgia or Azerbaijan, but I think you have to look at every country individually, and it's very difficult to, within this framework, to kind of standardize every country in the region.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador,
Yeah,
please.
no, it's not desire, it's an opportunity. It's a huge chance. For example, Central Asia, it's one of the strategically important regions of the world. We have a lot of opportunities, have the chance to become more developed region in the world in the near future. For example, first, population, as you said. Population, total population of Central Asia exceeds generally 100 million people. It's a huge sufficient market for the presence and a global successful business to sustain. What we need for economic development? First, it's a market. We have a market. Second, as you said, as you mentioned in your presentation, and we have all natural resources which necessary for economic development. Natural gas, oil, rare earth metals, which can be used for the production, high technology, and the huge water resources. And the main thing is we have talented, hardworking, educated people, especially young youth who are very interested in getting high technology skills. The third, the main important factor is the geographical, geopolitical position of Central Asia. Central Asia is located at the center of Eurasia continent. We have a border with large countries with large population. From one side, China, from another side, Russia, and the Arabic countries. Therefore, the main thing is to achieve this goal, integration. If we are unite each other, if we are unite our potential, we can develop quickly. So it's very important. We were not interested in a small country for the global successful business. We are very interested for global business as a large region, with large population. Therefore, the main factor is, the main task is for our leaders to integrate our country, our region. Therefore, this year, our president of the Republic, he, by his leadership, was a summit of president of Central Asian countries. July 20 this year in the Czech Republic. And the first in the history, first time, all international countries adopted 4 main documents for integration, how to integrate this international countries. It was very important documents. We are eager and we are firmly committed to continue the policy to improve the relations with our neighbors, with our brothers and neighbors. It's an important question. Second, the main project, which is very important for developing Central Asian countries, it's improving and strengthening the infrastructure. We don't have enough infrastructure to first which connecting with Central Asian countries and the employees with chance ocean. Therefore, we started by the initiative of our president. We have already started one state project, construction railway, which connecting
Yes.
the Czech Republic, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and through Rumsfeld to the Karachi, which gives access to the ocean. It's very important. And by leadership of our president, we suggested to build huge hydropower plant, which is called Moderator 1. It's one of the biggest hydropower plant in Central Asia. The capacity of this hydropower plant is huge, which gives some chance for opening new production areas in order to develop internal natural resources. Therefore, I think we step by step and all we understand that to develop our region, we should be together. If we are together, we are strong.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ambassador. Reactions?
As for, we actually talked to Dr. Stam, and he told us think big and broad. So in this presentation, we try to think big and ambitious. So, and well, we totally agree. So I think that one of the main points that within CAMCA region, we should and we must launch a development bank. I think it's a great momentum now. Kazakhstan, for example, has roughly $8 billion in oil fund. So part of this money could be as a charter capital for development.
Who else? Yes, sir. We don't have any ladies asking questions, do we? Just in a moment.
My name is Martin Herman. I spent quite a lot of time in the region and listening to your comments. I hear a lot of opportunities, potential, and I heard democracy. I have experienced situations that are very far from democracy. In Uzbekistan, Namangan, massacre there. I think I came to the conclusion that for your region, my ideal model for development is South Korea. And why is South Korea so successful? It's primarily because of education. South Korea has not been a democracy, and it's now becoming a democracy after many, many decades. But it has been a very severe dictatorship. In any region, I think democracy has no tradition. China is an example that, not too much of Russia, but that is a bad example of what leadership, visionary leadership. The Kazakh president used to be an ambassador to Singapore. So he has seen what it is Look at Singapore 60 years ago and now. Kazakhstan also on education. President Nazarbayev had Nazarbayev Leadership Academy. I met many of the students, brilliant people. But and here you are only 4 here, some more of you.
We have 12.
Oh, more, okay. But in order to make a difference, we need a huge scaling up of it. And that means in primary and secondary schools. That's where education comes from. That's where talent and capabilities develop. They can be developed. They get frustrated. And you didn't mention jobs. Afghanistan is a wonderful resource. And if you are frustrated, you get developed. And there's plenty of market there. So this is my comment. I want to.
If I may, that's great comment. I would say that within 2 or 3 months, the government of Kazakhstan, the new Minister of Education, signed a memorandum of understanding with the top British and American universities. So they are going to open in each region of the Kazakhstan, the branch of the Western universities. One of them, University of Arizona, is going to open a branch, already open, just near the Petropavlovsk, just to the border of Russia. I think it's a great signal and a great goal. And well, I think that's where I'm this.
If I may follow up on that.
Actually, the lady behind you has been waiting for a long time.
I'd like to add here, yeah. So in terms of capacity building and promoting, so in terms of capacity building, we mentioned that the universities of Arizona already established their branch program, and we also have the Arizona State University launch a double degree program with so this is actually the real platform for exchange. So bringing people from Kazakhstan and the staff members, faculty members, students to the United States. We had the delegation members in Almaty, Astana, who also organized the tour for the Uzbekistan and unfortunately very much. And also to add to the Bolshak program, we have a lot of people right now, more than 100 different groups at George Washington University, etc., having their 1 year, 12 years for research at this American universities. And this is the real platform of exchanging after not only the education, but also the cultural experience. And this is the real actions taken by the education institutions.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm actually involved in, marginally involved in exactly the same thing in Ukraine. American University in Kiev. And what I've been telling these people, that if I want that university and your university, whatever that would be, to be an example of a stellar success. And how do you make that a stellar success? You make it a stellar success by having excellent faculty, right? And Arizona is a good choice, but well-prepared students. Students have to speak English. Students have to be prepared well. And the university has to have a large pool from which to select students on merit. That means I personally favor the American college preparation system that College Board has, advanced placement. Right? If students have a couple of advanced placement courses and do very well, and you have many of them, that university will be extremely successful. That's what you need to do. You need to scale up at the secondary school level.
Right. For example, in terms of education, after the pandemic, the global economics change, economic structures change. I mean, from the traditional resource-based economy, it's going to the digital economy, to the real economy. Therefore, the role of high technology is rising step by step in day by day. Therefore, our government pay more attention for the development of high technology. He declared with the public high technology one of the main strategic area in our country. To pay more attention because 99% of our life closely connected with high technology. Yes. We are getting information from high technology, we paying through the high technology. We everything through the high technology. Therefore, it's one of the main priorities in our economy. It's a high technology. Education plays very, very well.
Just one word.
Yes, but please,
Sorry, I think that I've observed now, and I've been involved in a couple of projects in both in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, as well as abroad, that there's a high rise of online education platforms that is increasingly growing. And to your point, I think education is one of the key important elements for the vision, as well as for the integration to the global market. But I definitely agree with both you know, Mr. And Mr. Martin with your comments. I think with education, we'll definitely make sure that we revise this presentation. It will be one of the key things.
gentlemen at the back. Please louder.
Sure, sir. I'm to try Afghanistan. And first of all, can I smile while speaking with them? So anyway, I have one complaint, one suggestion, one candidate. My complaint, I would like to see my country fully in that slide, not half of mine. That's the complaint should be complete on this slide. The suggestion and I would like to see individual country what they need and what are the challenges and individual country as well. And beside this, what are the challenges what might be the solution for them? What might be the common goals? According to the relationship, Afghanistan is one of the countries that have a long history of very good and best relationship with the United States since Afghanistan was ruled by the kingdom beside the Shah and the land. We have, especially the United States has helped us during when we were invaded by the Russia, by the United States, Russia, United to our country. And in terms of the relation, we have really common relation like brotherhood. With Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, you're like brother, but you're different. Similarly, and many common goals, many common similarity between us. How do you guys ever analyze what might be more? If we could analyze, if we could work on to bring us more here and rather than the region, right? Because that, from my understanding, for the past 1 year, it was a very good space for trading. The only country we are in Afghanistan that had a lost trade was with Turkmenistan. We had trade with Tajikistan, Pakistan, but the number of the credit goes with Turkmenistan, right? And the pool, we are ready to the corridor as we did before. All you guys, I need the government of ready to send to Russia to expand this relationship.
Final reactions before we run out of time, please.
Okay, so in terms of the map, sorry that it offended you that Afghanistan is my country too, but I was talking about the influence of the security, Taliban to the region, the terroristic groups, and you know my intentions. So, and the other, for your other question about I totally agree that every single country in CAMCA and in the region, they need different, there's a need for more events on every single country because they are too different. Yeah, but they have a lot of similarities too. So this is only an example presentation that yes, we have a lot of differences. Yes, we are so different from each other, but we can come together, sit like this, and talk about the region altogether. We're gonna. I personally am invested in my country, and I am working to have another event on Afghanistan for sure. I'm more than sure that my colleagues and fellows are going to do the same thing. Especially on the Lebanon, Afghanistan, I would definitely talking about it.
Well, I think that, first of all, thank you very much for your feedback. And we will take it into consideration. So hopefully within a year we return back to another presentation.
I have time for one last
very
comment.
big point. So, first of all, just wanted to say that I think presentation was, from my perspective, designed to present the region, not individual countries, and present opportunities from the regional perspective. I think it was very good that you focused on demography and presenting it as an opportunity. I think you should have done a little bit more in how this population can transform into, let's say, market opportunity from the audience perspective. Let's say what's the purchasing power, what's the projection of purchasing power of this population, where market can evolve. Ideally, this presentation is supposed to solve your region, our region, to the audience, to the world. You mentioned about investments from Russia and China, 70 billion, but we haven't mentioned how much US investments were made in the region. And we are talking about more than $100 billion, much more than
160 billion.
See, twice, or more than twice. So I think that's important to also present that the US is not just, bystander. Historically, and it's still, so how to make this interest to grow? That was, and then I have many other comments we can talk about.
Just last one. So I think there's some ideas that maybe spurred further discussion, but one of our gathering, what I've learned that I think when you start an idea and then having more discussion around it, may yield some sort of action in the future. I think the idea, at least from my perspective, it was to spur some interest, to explore some potential areas of interest and collaboration that could yield or become a bigger project as part of this vision.
Thank you. What I would like to say in closing this is a couple of things. The first is that your presentation was so thorough that people took it as a graduate seminar, and that's where you got the amount of feedback that you did. I hope you appreciate that. What my takeaway from this discussion today is that I think there is a disconnect, and there's a growing disconnect, I think, between the perception of this region in places like Washington, D.C., and how the reality in the region is changing. We have representatives here of a new generation. This new generation is not only in universities, it is in governments. It is at high levels of government. And we are on the cusp, or I would even say we have a generational shift that has already started to happen in the political systems, in the business world, definitely in academic and other institutions all across the CAMCA region. It's faster in some countries, it's slower than in other countries. But I think the reality is that